Yo, 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 you beautiful people, what's up? I saw really interesting hands on, let me get down, YouTube just now. And I wanted to review it because I thought it was super sick, and it's not something that Solver's going to tell you much about. And it's definitely a hand that you want to approach from an exploitative manner. So the context of this hand is we have two players, one called Dennis and one called Art, playing on Live at the Bike, an extremely good show if you're interested in watching these kind of sick hands. I really like the way they have it set up. They're bringing poker TV back to the masses in a really cool way. I think they're making some really good moves in the scene. So they have Dennis and Art. Dennis, from what I've seen, he seems to be more of a recreational player, but has quite a lot of talent hidden up his sleeves. Art, very decent professional, I would say, leans a bit too much towards the game theory side. I'm sure he would disagree, but generally extremely capable and definitely capable of making some big moves. The blinds are $200, $400. They're sitting around $60,000 deep, which sounds pretty insane, but it's actually only 150 big blinds. So Dennis opens up the big blind, and there's a straddle, so it's 200, probably 100, 200, 400. He opens up to 2.5 thousand, a 4.25x raise. Pretty damn big, unnecessarily big, but whatever, you can do whatever, especially in live poker. You just open to any size. I recommend for you at home, if you're playing like the 1-2, the 1-3, don't stick to your online sizes. Don't just like 2.5x the button. That's really annoying when people do that as well, especially when you have to use the little chips. But you can just go whatever size you need to go to get heads up as often as you can. If you have something like Ace King, I don't know, 10x it. In some 1-2 games, you can just 10x. Some 1-2 games, you 5x it. Try to feel out the table and work out what size you can go to get maybe 2 or 3-way in a hand. So Dennis opens up with King 3 suited, and Art defends with Jack 10 offsuit, 1 heart. The flop comes down to Queen 8-7, 3 hearts, and it's obviously a pretty damn big flop. Dennis then decides to go for the snap min bet. And man, I absolutely adored it when I saw it. I really, really like it. The cool thing about this is that for the rest of the hand, he looks extremely capped. Because I know from playing against other recreational players, when someone snap min bets a board that's very wet like this, what they usually have is something like 6s with a heart, maybe like Ace-7 with the ace of hearts, hands along those lines that they're not going to be folding to a raise too often, but they're definitely not nutted. So if I see someone doing that very often, I'll lean towards just piling on. Art goes for a $2,200 raise from 400. It's not super big, and I would argue it seems reasonably obvious that Art isn't trying to just win the hand straight away. You don't expect someone to just snap min bet on this board and then straight away fold it. It seems like he's going for a multi-street bluff. He's setting himself up. He has the Jack of Hearts as backup. He has the 9 as backup. He has quite a lot of equity versus the perceived range of Dennis, which is going to be something along the lines of like a pair with a heart. You know, something like maybe 8-9 with no heart. Something along those lines. It seems like a pretty safe play to just bump up the pot and maybe get a big bet on the turn that will get through. The turn is brutal for Art, and it really, just given the circumstances of how Dennis has played it, it's extra brutal. Now it really feels like Art has the absolute nuts. I mean, what kind of hand that beats Jack 10 here would snap min bet and snap call a raise on the flop? So Art, feeling extremely confident about his hand, goes for a 78% bet. I love it. That's the exact number I have on my PokerStars little bet slider thing. And Dennis snap calls him. He beats him into the pot. It's crazy. I really love this play. And anyone that's watched my masterclass or has seen me play on Twitch knows that I have a very specific note that I have for a lot of players, which is SCMSDV, Snap Call's Marginal Showdown Value, meaning that if someone has a kind of weakish hand that they want to try and put you off from putting more money in the pot, being like, oh, I'm so confident I snap call, it generally means they have like a crappy 1-pair hand. It's a really cool play to then reverse that in game, and you can see that Dennis has really thought this through, maybe before the time, because these are now 2 plays in a row that he's done the exact reverse timing and sizing that I would expect someone to actually have with a weak hand. So the river looks like it's going to be saving Art just that little extra bit of money, because if the river were a blank, then everything probably would have gone in. However, now there's 4 to a straight. It's very easy for someone to have a 10, which means that ranges kind of shrink a bit, meaning that you're not going to stack off with a weaker hand when it's so easy that someone can have a stronger hand. This is something actually a lot of people don't tend to realize. They still end up stacking off with some of their 2-pair hands in these kind of situations, when it's just so easy that someone else can have a really big hand. Something to pay attention to, relative ranges instead of absolute hand strength. So Art then goes for a $5,400 bet, a very small bet. And I actually really like this size. If we think about what Dennis's range on the turn is, he's going to have a lot of 1-pair hands, especially when he snap calls. I would say a lot of like king queens or like 6s with a heart, hands like that. So if you think, okay, what size do I want to go to try and exploit that range of the range that I think my opponent has? And this is really crucial if you want to be thinking on the level above your opponents. You think, okay, what is their range? What range do I look like? And how do I exploit their range with my actions? You don't need to be thinking about all this game theory stuff, especially when you're playing live poker against people that don't know what game theory means, especially when you're playing micro stakes, small stakes, tournaments, anything before you get to the super high roller stuff. You don't need to be thinking about game theory. It's just irrelevant. But there are things to learn from game theory. There are concepts to grab from it and be like, oh, actually, yeah, thanks, Pio Solver. I hadn't thought of using that line. Anyway, I really like this size. I think that if you're looking at exploiting his 1-pair hands, like maybe like king queen, this is a good size to maybe get a crying call, giving him a really juicy price. If you're looking at other hands, maybe like ace-6 for the ace of hearts, 6 of the 6 of hearts, this is a pretty cool thing to do as well. And the reason for that is, if we're so confident that we have the best hands, it's unlikely he has king 10 unless it's specifically king 10 with a king or 10 of hearts, which is really unlike, it's only 2 combinations. We just think we have the best hand because he's snap called so many times. He's played it real weird. He played it real weak looking. It's so unlikely that Dennis has a flush from Art's perspective, which is why it makes what Dennis has done so clever, and I really like this. So yeah, I really like this. And this is another, I really like the bet sizing from Art. It's another really cool thing that I've spoken about extensively on my masterclass and other things. It's the BSTI label. Everyone out there that knows me knows what that means. It means bet small to induce. It is one of the most powerful techniques you can use against recreational players or bad regs. It means betting small size with a pretty strong hand to kind of under-rep your hand and then induce a large raise. Sometimes you can even do it with 2nd pair if you're feeling really confident that they have 4th pair or something like that, because they're like, well, it's a small bet, so this is from the person who has to call or raise or fold from the other person. They're like, okay, it's a small bet. I don't think my hand's good because it looks really value-y, but it's weak. And I don't want to fold. I don't want to fold to a really dumb small bet. So, you know, he's got a weak hand. I raise. It seems like the only logical conclusion, especially when someone is thinking quite quickly. This is so powerful to use against recreational players. The BSTI, write it down. I really recommend it. It's made me so much money in the past, and so many of my students have found all these different BSTI spots. There is a lot of nuance behind the BSTI. There are different spots where it works, different spots where it doesn't work. There are different timings you can use for different spots against different players. It really is, you need to take all these variables into account and then make a really solid decision based on that. But as soon as you get into the habit of thinking on this and having that play in your repertoire, your autopilot will be able to kick in and it'll be able to do it real quick, because sometimes it's good to do it real quick because then they act real quick. When you act real quick, usually a recreational player will act quicker as well. So I like the sizing. Dennis then decides to go all in. Of course, I mean, he could choose any other size, but now he's played it so weird, he's under-repped his hand. He needs to make it look like he's got 6s with the heart or the ace of hearts by itself. And all in my opinion, would be the size to go. It's the size that if you want to look bluffy, you want to make it look like you're folding out a 10. And this is a really cool psychological thing where, let's say you're thinking as Art, you would say, okay, from Dennis's perspective, he doesn't know that he's capped because he hasn't thought through the hand like I have. He doesn't know that because he snap called the turn, he can't have a flush. He doesn't know, he might not be thinking that because he min bet the flop, he doesn't have a flush. And this is definitely a really solid thought process to have if you are in most situations against most recreational players, because this tends to be how people think. They don't know. There's like a disparity in information. They've given you a piece of information that you've then extrapolated and you've come to a conclusion. This means this and this means that. They haven't come to that conclusion because they're not aware like you are. And this is the cool thing about exploitative guessing games. Unfortunately, Dennis seems to be one of the people that in this situation, at least, he's on the level above, and there's often not much you can do in these situations. Imagine if 98% of players that you play against, if they're going to be min bet snap calling the flop on this kind of boards, they're going to have a really weak hand, but then that 2% of players, they're going to be on that level above. You still, if you don't know who's who, you still need to assume that you're going to have to go with the maths. You're going to have to assume they're one of the 98% because you're going to be printing money in the long run if you play as if they were one of those things. And this is something that's really key that I've spoken about a lot. Population tendencies, not always going to be correct, but this is part of the cool guessing game that exploitative and intuitive poker allows you to play. You don't need to worry about having the best block. You don't need to worry about all this stuff because you can make so much money if you're better than other people at guessing. And this is exactly what I like to hammer home to my students, and it's been working extremely well. So back on us as art, they do mention in the commentary he's got the Jack of Hearts blocker, and this is something that's extremely painful for me to look at. And I know that I don't know art specifically well, but I know a lot of GTO players are like, well, I block a lot of flushes. There's not much I can do here. If I fold this, I'll be over-folding. It's one of the best hands I can have in this spot. I got a call. I understand. I understand where it comes from. If you want to have a balanced strategy, by all means, you do you. I just argue very fervently and vehemently that it's completely stupid. But there are different ways to win in poker, and this has made a lot of people a lot of money. But yeah, whatever. Debate for another time. I'm sure you've seen a couple of my videos on this topic. Back on us, that I'm just going to focus from an exploitative point of view because I think the game theory point of view is a bit easier. We can say, okay, he's played it real stupidly weird. We have to assume he might not know that he's kind of capped his range. Maybe if you have a bit of a read on Dennis that he is that kind of next level thinking player, you can definitely stop and think about this. And the scenario is a lot different than if you were playing online Zoom, for instance. He is putting $50,000 worth of real cash money into the pot. That's significant, and people don't do that willy-nilly, at least not many people. I love the people that do that. They're my people. However, it really does take a lot to put 50K into the middle, especially as a bluff. It takes a lot. Instead of if you're playing like 20 and 25 and I'll Zoom, it doesn't take that much to just click all in and lose $25, rebuy for the next one. So you do have to take this into consideration. Would he be the kind of person to, if he is a bet small to induce kind of person, is he the kind of person that would then follow through the 50K bluff? And this is where the population tendencies would split. Some people out of that 98% that I described, some people would never, ever, ever put 50K in as a bluff. And that's something where you can be like, okay, against most people, I can actually probably make a fold here, even though that goes against my read on the flop. I have an even stronger read, and the scales then counterbalance towards, like, no one ever puts a 50K bluff in. No one ever does that. But I have heard Dennis is pretty crazy. He's capable of a lot of things. And I would not blame Art at all for making this decision to call. I think it's an extremely difficult spot to be in. But given that he's capped his range in these ways, and given that he's a very crazy player, word on the street is, then I myself, I think I would lean towards making a call in this spot. There is one other thing to think about before we look at what actually happened. Dennis's live tells. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it because I've never seen such an angry YouTube audience of when you talk about live tells. It's insane. So if people do want to hear more about that, I do speak about my masterclass a bit, and I'm going to do more about it in the future as well. And I speak about it a bit on the Discord channel that I have, which hopefully will be in the link below. Please don't remind me if it's not. And one of the cool things that you have to do in poker, especially when you get to the high stakes, is you have to deduce live tells, and you have to be able to tell the difference between someone looking weak and someone wanting to look weak. And as we can see here, Dennis he's definitely looking weak, but there are a few things that someone who's quite astute at live tells would be able to say that is actually someone that's confident but trying to look weak. And there are quite a few big distinctions between that. It's not always the most solid thing. Everyone does different things. Some people have different ways of acting in different kind of situations. I would say that judging by Dennis's body language, I would definitely lean more towards folding. However, given how strong the read was, that he was capped on the flop and that now he's repping a flush suddenly, I would probably still make this call and just accept that I got owned. And sometimes that happens, especially if you play intuitive poker, you just get owned quite a lot. But hopefully you're doing a lot more owning than you are getting owned, unless you're worse than your opponents, in which case I can't help you. Go play some more poker, and then you might get better. So I wouldn't blame you if you made this call. I wouldn't blame you if you made this fold. There are lots of different thought processes that you can approach to make these kind of decisions, and this is what I really want to teach people, is that there isn't just one way of thinking about stuff. There are so many different variables that you have to all weigh up inside your head. You have to make what's called a multivariate analysis inside your head, and that you can't quantify. A lot of people, they argue, oh, I only play with logic and not intuition. Bullshit. Can you take into that many you can take that many variables into account and not use intuition? There's nothing that complex that logic can just like snap get an answer for. Everyone's using their intuition, just some people aren't as aware as other people that they are. So make this multivariate analysis. Do you believe the flop read was stronger? Do you believe the live read is more strong? And you're the only person that can do this. You have to use that creative spark inside of you to really analyze which one you think is more relevant. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it, and the more you'll make money in the long run. Hope this was useful. There are a lot of very difficult concepts there. Please let me know if you want to hear more about a specific concept. And peace. Much love. She's so cute.
Hi.
The slow blink.
Jack of Hearts in his hand is pretty crucial.